Hey, how you doing? Hope you all are doing great. As you've seen in the thumbnail, in this video, we're going to see what if Ichigo and Rukia had a child. This is part 1, and before getting into video, I request you to check the author of this fanfic and show some love and support. Name of the story is Whispers in Your Heart by Kitty Cat 626. Do check it. All details and description. And if you want next part of this series, please leave a like, share, and consider subscribe. Let's get into the video. Also, check out Patreon for uncensored spicy content. Link in description. June 3rd, 2007, 3 years later. What did you say? Ichigo asked numbly, gripping the hand of his small daughter tighter. She was restless, bouncing around, wanting to get home. He looked at the 3 captains standing in front of him. Captain Yamamoto, Captain Kachiki, and Captain Unohana. And they were all there for one reason, and one reason only. The reason his face was pale and his hands were shaking as he reached down to pick up his restless daughter. I'm sorry, but this is the way it must be, Captain Kurosaki. But why? He asked, trying not to yell. It always upset Rei, Michio's twin. We have our reasons, and those reasons will be revealed in time. Once Captain Yamamoto had finished speaking, Unohana took over for him. I'm sorry, Ichigo, but they are too strong. I first noticed it a few months ago. Whenever Rei and Michio are together, their power is more than anything I've seen. Even yours or Captain Kenpachi's. But when they are apart, it is so low that we can barely detect it. I never thought of it before, but the twins have a connection, a very deep one. We know that they have even managed to talk to each other in their minds, right? Ichigo nodded, and she continued. There are people looking for them. People who want power. Aizen Sosuke, too. He yearns for power, and he will do anything to get it. He'll kill Rukia, Ichigo, both you and I know it. I'll protect her, Ichigo yelled, forgetting to keep his voice down as he ran his hands over Rei's soft, black and orange hair. She whimpered slightly as his voice rose. You can't, Kurosaki, Byakuya said. You're gone on missions for days, even weeks at a time. You can't protect her or the children. I can. You can't. Why? Why dead? Do you have any idea what that will do to Rukia? Any idea? Ichigo asked. Not only me, but Rei too. God, Rukia loves the twins so much. That would break her, he said, gripping tighter to Rei. All 3 of the captains in the room were trying to keep the emotion off of her face, but all 3 knew exactly how it would hurt Rukia. In the worst way possible. I said there are reasons. I cannot tell them to you now, but this must happen. Rukia must believe that you and Rei are dead. July 11th, 2009. Mommy? Who's that? Rukia smiled as she sat Michio, who was now almost 5, on her lap and showed him the photo album she had put together for him. That's your sister. Nah, my sissy is itty-bitty. I gets to protect her, he said happily, pointing over to the crib in which his 1.5-year-old sister slept. Her black hair was spread out beneath her face, and her tiny hands curled and uncurled in her sleep. Rukia ruffled Michio's hair, smiling sadly. He was so much like Ichigo. Yes, but you have another sister to protect too. I do. Michio's violet eyes were bright and wide in the way only a small child could manage. Rukia nodded. Yes, you do. Where is she? Michio asked, looking around the room for any signs of a second sister. She's gone like Daddy. But she'll come back, right? Like Daddy will? Rukia tried to force back tears. He didn't know. Michio didn't know his father and his twin sister were dead. She hadn't told him because one day, maybe they could come back. But he needed to know, just not now. He was only 4, just a baby really, but he was so much like his father. When Enyame Hizana, named after both her own sister and Rukia's sister, was born, he had announced happily, I wants to protect her and you, Mommy. At that time, he had just gotten out of diapers and she still had to baby-proof the house or he would eat spoons. Yeah, baby. She'll come back. What's her name? Michio asked, bouncing up and down in Rukia's lap, turning the page in the photo album with his tiny fingers. His eyes lit up when he saw the next picture. It's Daddy. Rukia was glad that Michio was turned away from her, because she could no longer hold back her tears when she saw how happy Michio was to see his father, even if it was just a picture. She said, trying to keep her voice under control. Her name was Rei Enyame. That's my other sissy's name, he said, poking a picture of all 4 of them together. Rei and Michio were being held by Rukia and Ichigo, and were about a year old. There she is again. I like her. I like her too. I loved her. And your daddy did too. I want to see her, he said, looking up at Rukia. Mommy, why are you crying? He asked, worried, as he stood up on the bed, his bare feet sinking in the blankets as he reached up to hug Rukia. I don't want Mommy to cry. Rukia hugged him back, wiping her tears away. Michio held on to her for the longest time before he pulled back and placed a wet, slobbery kiss on her cheek. I love you, Mommy. I love you too, baby. But bedtime. Michio groaned loudly and dropped back on her bed, bouncing a few times before he landed flat and pretended to die. Rukia scooped him up in her arms and carried him over to his bed on the other side of the room. Once he was tucked in, he came back to life and kissed Rukia again before saying, "Read me a story." No, no story tonight. I'll let you stay up for a while and look at pictures if you want, though, Rukia said, handing him the photo album with a smile. He snuggled under his blanket in his doggy pajamas and opened the photo album, smiling every time he saw Ray. Rukia watched him, and soon his small, violet eyes began drooping with sleep. After his breathing had slowed and his eyes fell all the way closed, Rukia kissed him on the head and carefully took the album from his hands. She placed it on the bed, letting her fingers run over the picture of them all. Ichigo was holding Ray, and the longer she looked at it, the more she believed they would come walking through the door any day. What would she look like? What would Ray be like? Would she be like her brother? Happy and bouncy? Or more of a girl? Would she draw bunnies or dogs? Would she like ketchup or mustard? Would she like pink or purple? If she was alive, would her shoes be bigger than the tiny pair Rukia had saved from when she was 1.5? Would she love her baby sister or be jealous? Would Ichigo love Inyim? She would never know. Backing away from the photo album, Rukia wiped her tears away and leaned over the crib of the tiny baby. Inyim was nearing 2 years, yet she was small. Michio was small too. Would Ray be small? If Ichigo and Ray were alive, she would be living with them, even if it was here in Soul Society. Even though Ichigo was promoted to captain and asked to fight in the war, he still came home every day. She had believed he always would. But one day, even though it was just to visit his family, he had never come back. She and Michio hadn't gone because they were both sick. Michio had the flu, and Ichigo believed that was what Rukia had too. But he was wrong, and he had never known. If she had told him she was pregnant again, would he have stayed home? Would he still be alive? Would he have been able to be called Dada? Instead of the man that was in Enyame's life, Dada had been Enyame's first word, and it had been said to a man that was not her father. Now though, she called that man Unk, or in English, Uncle. But before, she had called Renji, her childhood friend, and the man that had given her and the children a home when Ichigo had passed away, Dada. Renji had been shocked, and he hadn't reacted. Rukia, however, had run from the room, crying. She had refused to look at Enyame for a while. But then, Rukia, let me come in. Enyame wants you, she's crying. Renji, leave me alone, Rukia said, wiping tears away as she stared at Ichigo's photograph. Renji, however, ignored her and opened the door. He walked in and sat down on the bed next to her, reaching over and gently taking the photo from her. She looked up fast and tried to reach for it again, but he held it out of reach. Hold her, he said, motioning to Enyame. Once the baby was in Rukia's arms, he turned to her and said, now, Enyame, who am I? Enyame bounced in Rukia's arms happily. Rukia bit her lip, trying to hold back tears. Although Renji was the closest thing Enyame had to a father, he would never replace Ichigo. Never. But what Enyame said surprised her. Unk. Renji smiled at the shocked look on Rukia's face. While I was on Earth, I saw a lot of little girls calling men that were close to them uncle. So, I tried it out. Sorry about earlier, he said, reaching out to brush back Enyame's soft black hair. Rukia shook her head. No, sorry. I was being stupid, Renji. I guess I need to move on, but I can't. Rukia was crying again. Renji reached over and placed his hand on her face, gently running his thumb over her skin. No, don't be like that, Rukia. You loved him. It'll take a while for you to heal. I am sorry, Renji. You gave me a home. You helped me with Enyame when she was born. You gave her name, but all I've given you is trouble. I put 2 kids into your home and haven't given you anything. I'm sorry. Hey, I happen to be fond of Michio. He reminds me of Ichigo. He's a little monster. And Enyame, well, she's like a daughter to me. I know I can't replace Ichigo, ever, but let me into your lives. Let me help heal your heart. Renji reached down and gently kissed Rukia on the lips. She responded for a second before pulling back and looking away. No, I can't, Renji. I'm sorry. Just then Michio, who was only 2.5, ran inside the room and jumped up onto Renji's lap. Hey, Uncle Renji, looky what I drew. It's me and Anyame and Mommy and Daddy and you. Renji smiled, and as he saw the look of pain on Rukia's face as she stared at the crude drawing of Ichigo, he knew he would never be able to be that important to Rukia. She could never love him. I have to go. See you later, Squirt, he said, ruffling Michio's hair. Bye-bye, Uncle Renji. Rukia smiled sadly as she watched Michio wave happily to Renji. He had given so much, but in return, she wasn't able to give Renji anything. It was true. That was only a year ago, but still, the memory was still clear in her mind. Renji had taken her in, given her a home, was by her side. Everything when Ichigo had died. At the funeral, when Michio had cried frantically for Ichigo, trying to reach out to the casket that was being lowered into the ground, Renji had been the one to pick him up and comfort him. He was the one to help her through pregnancy, and he was the one who had named her an Ichigo's baby. Not Ichigo, never Ichigo. He was gone. June 7th, 2007, 3:44 a.m. He was only going for them. They were in danger. If he and Ray stayed, Michio and Rukia would be killed. He had to go. Renji, will you do something for me? Ichigo asked, smiling sadly at Ray as he pulled her coat on. Ray whimpered, her eyes closing as she sleepily shuffled around in Ichigo's arms. Renji nodded. Yeah, man, anything. Just glad you let me in on all this. Take care of Rukia and Michio. Please? Take care of them for me. Renji nodded, stuffing his hands in his pockets. Sure. I'll make sure they're fine. Thanks, Renji. You have no idea how much it means to me to know they'll be all right, he said, hugging Ray to his chest. She didn't much like this and began crying. Others were watching, waiting. Byakuya and Unohana were there, and Isane and Yoruichi and Urahara. They were waiting for him to leave to the human world. Kurosaki, Byakuya said, walking up. Rukia doesn't know what's going on, does she? He asked. Ichigo shook his head. She might suspect something, though I doubt it. I wanted to say goodbye to Michio. I was alone, but when I said goodbye to her, I think she thought something was going on. But I'm sure she doesn't know. She wanted to tell me something before I left, though. Will you find out what it was? Byakuya nodded and reached out to gently rub his hand over Ray's soft hair. Despite trying not to, he loved his niece and nephew, and he would probably never see Ray again after this. Tell Rukia I love her, all right? Ichigo said, taking in a deep breath to try and control his emotions. Michio too. And here, give this to Michio when he's a little older. And if I ever die, give this to Rukia. Please, please don't read it. He handed Byakuya a small box for Michio and a letter put in an envelope and tied with a beautiful silk ribbon. Byakuya fingered it for a second before nodding. He said, Kurosaki, I might not have always liked you. Actually, for a while, I hated you, but you were good to my sister and made her very happy. And you gave her Michio and Ray. And I'm sorry that you're leaving. If we were never friends, you were at least there for my sister when I wasn't. Thank you. And if we ever meet again in the future, we could try and be the brother-in-laws we never were. Ichigo smiled. Yeah, guess so, huh? Byakuya stood back and Renji walked forward. Ichigo stuck out his hand to shake Renji's, but the redhead pulled him into a hug. It was the first time someone male, besides his father, had hugged him, but Ichigo found it felt strangely. Right. It was the last time he was going to see any of them. Well, see you later, Ichigo said, waving as he began to walk through the gate. Before he completely passed through, he whispered, see you soon, Rukia. I know I will, because nothing in this world, or in any other, can keep me from you. July 12th, 2009. Daddy, do I have to go to school? 4-year-old Rei Kurosaki whined, kicking her legs back and forth as Ichigo tried to put her light pink shoes on her small feet. He smirked and caught one foot and held it still enough to shove the shoe on and tie it. Now, just to get the second one. Yeah, you have to go to school? Why? Rei said, sticking out her bottom lip. Once Ichigo got her other shoe on, he picked her off the counter. Because you need to grow up really smart like Daddy. Rei laughed and stuck her tongue out of a large hole in between the teeth she was missing. Ichigo stuck his tongue out at her, too, and began walking outside. Once she was on the sidewalk, she began skipping along, and Ichigo had to run to catch up with her. When he had, though, he took her hand, limiting her bouncing. She had grown a lot. Since the day that he had disappeared with her, she had grown so much, though she was still short. But he saw Rukia in her. Her hair, though it was still orange with black stripes, it was now longer. He had tied it up in pigtails with the ribbons that Rukia had made for Rei for her first birthday. They were bright red and matched the jumper she was wearing. Her eyes were still ice blue, but now they seemed to have a ring of violet around them. She acted like Rukia too. She loved bunnies, had one as a pet, loved to draw, badly. Although he told her they were great, especially when she drew the ones of him, her and Rukia. She loved to laugh and smile, and her attitude was a perfect match of Rukia's. But she didn't remember Michio at all. He had never showed her pictures, though, only told her stories about a brave little boy that she, Rei, had once saved the life of. Rei snapped Ichigo out of her thoughts by suddenly hiding behind him and saying in a small voice, "Daddy, I'm scared." They had arrived at the preschool that Rei was going to go to. It was her first day. When he kneeled down beside her, she was nearly crying. He hugged her gently as he said, "Can you be a brave girl for Daddy?" He asked softly, reaching down to pick a flower out of the ground. "Can you take this to school with you?" He handed her the orange daisy. "And bring it back to me when you get out? If you could do that and have fun, then I'll take you out to dinner tonight." Rei nodded slowly as she wrapped her tiny, slim fingers around the flower. "Ok, Daddy, but I'm still scared." "Don't be, sweetie. It'll be fine. Promise?" she asked, her wide eyes moving up to meet his. "Promise," he said, kissing her on the forehead. She smiled at him and took his hand again. Once she was in the schoolyard, she tugged at his hand, wanting to go play on the swing. He smiled as he watched her go. Rukia would have wanted to be here for her little girl's first day of school. She would have wanted to be with him as he reassured Rei it would be fine. Rukia had been there for her first word, mama, first steps, and first smile. But not for her first lost tooth, her first scratched knee, learning to ride a tricycle, her first real Christmas, and her first day of school. Rukia had missed so much of her baby girl's life. It wasn't fair, but he knew she was fine because he had asked Renji to take care of Rukia. And if there was one thing he knew, it was that Renji loved Rukia. He would take good care of her and give Michio a good life. "Daddy?" Rei asked, pulling on his arm. He smiled as he looked down at her. "I want to go inside. I'm scared of the mean boy." Ichigo smiled and nodded, picking her up under the arms and setting her small form on his shoulders. She squealed happily and grabbed onto his hair, grinning as he walked her inside. When he walked up to the desk and the woman behind it asked for Rei's name, she said proudly, "I'm Rei Anyam Kurosaki." She smirked as she spelled it slowly. The woman smiled at her. "Well, hello, Rei. You're a smart one." Ichigo smiled up at Rei and poked her in the foot. Rei then used said foot to kick Ichigo softly. "She gets it from her mommy, Doncha Rei?" "Aha!" she said. "Let me down, Daddy." Ichigo let her down, and she began to run in circles while he filled out all the paperwork. He glanced back her every few seconds, then asked the lady, "Will you keep an eye on her? She likes to get in trouble." The woman nodded, and as soon as Ichigo was done with the paperwork, he walked over to Rei and kneeled down beside her. "I have to go, sweetie. I'll be back later, though." Rei nodded, her bottom lip trembling as Ichigo hugged her. "Come on, it'll be all right. Mommy's watching, okay?" Rei nodded and immediately perked up a little. "I'll make Mommy proud of me, Daddy." "Right. Bye-bye now," Ichigo said, kissing her forehead. She bounced off, sending him a sad look before following the other kids when they all ran into the story room. She would be okay. She always was. No matter what it was, whether a doctor's appointment, dentist, or first day of school, she would make it. Because she was strong like Mommy. "Okay, I promised that I would take you out to dinner. So where do you want to go?" Ichigo asked. Rei lifted her arms as Ichigo buckled her into her booster seat. Once she was buckled tight, he jumped into the front seat of the minivan and began driving away from the preschool. "Mickey D's!" she yelled, bouncing up and down. Ichigo looked at her in the mirror. "McDonald's for dinner?" "Aha!" She giggled and kicked her feet into the back of Ichigo's seat. He smirked and said, "Well, I said I'd take you if you were a good girl, so Mickey D's it is." "Yay!" Ichigo turned the radio on to Rei's favorite children's station, and she sang to several of the songs she knew well. When they arrived at the McDonald's, he unhooked her from the booster seat and put her on his shoulders as he walked inside. She smiled happily, and when he went to stand in line, several of the other parents who were making their children stand still gave him weird looks. "Daddy, I want nuggets," Ray said. Ichigo nodded, and once he had ordered her nuggets and his burger, he sat her down and gave her some ketchup to make a mess with. She never ate it. "Daddy, why did Mommy go away?" Ichigo smiled sadly. "Mommy didn't leave, baby. Daddy did. And only because he had to. He had to take you with him, too, to keep Mommy safe." "Oh. Daddy, why did all the other kids that came today come with mommies and not daddies?" "Dunno, sweetie. Maybe the daddies were at work." "Daddy, I want to see Mommy." I know. And we will someday. And you can see Michio, too." "I wants to see a picture," Ray said, sticking a nugget in her mouth and thoughtfully chewing on it. Ichigo nodded and shuffled around in his wallet. He smiled at the picture. It was one of him, Michio, Ray, and Rukia. He handed it to Ray, and she said, though a mouthful of nugget, "That me as a baby." "Yeah. And the other baby is Michio. My brother, right?" she asked, putting the picture down beside her. Ichigo nodded, and she was silent throughout the rest of the meal. Said silence, however, went out the window when they got into the car. "I met lots of people. There was one mean boy, but then there was a nice boy. His name was Kane. Then there was a girl I met, and she said she's be my friend. Her name is Anjuya. And another girl." Ichigo listened as much as he could. He liked hearing Ray's voice, really, but he really needed to concentrate on the road. "And then my teacher gave me juice like the ones I get at home," she said happily, kicking her feet back and forth in the booster seat. "Daddy, can I play with cookies when I get home? Have you fed him?" "Course I have. I always feed my bunny," she said, smiling. "And I woast a tooth." "When?" Ichigo asked, turning to look at her for a second. "Class. I saved it, like you asked me to." Ichigo nodded. He liked to save Ray's teeth. She had lost 3 so far, which was weird for a child so young, but he wanted to save them for Rukia to see. He remembered what his dad was like when he had missed Yuzu's first lost tooth. The least he could do for Rukia was save the tooth. Besides, it made Ray believe there actually was a tooth fairy. "And after I lost my tooth," Ichigo turned into the driveway and parked. Ray forgot all about telling him about her day in favor of her bunny. Once they were inside, Ichigo made sure both Ray and Cookies were happy, then went to do the laundry. That was when the phone rang. It was Kigo. "Hey man, come on over tonight," he said, his voice hurting Ichigo's ear. "Nah. Tonight is the night me and Ray watch a movie together." "Come on, Ichigo, live a little. You're always doing something with the girl. Come on over," Kigo begged. Ichigo could just picture the tear tracks floating down his face. "Nah. Staying home with Ray. I don't want to watch porn with you and drink myself dead," Ichigo said, sighing. "That's right. You've never seen a woman naked since Kachiki-san, have you?" he asked, a slight sarcastic edge to his voice. But it was true. Ichigo hadn't even so much as glanced in a woman that way since Rukia. He was going back to her, and he wouldn't do anything with another woman. Ever. "Shut up, Kigo. I have to do laundry." And with that, Ichigo hung up the phone and continued folding the small jumpers and socks of Ray's. He smiled, fingering them. She was now wearing a child size, not a baby's anymore. She was growing, and Rukia was missing it all. When Ichigo went into the kitchen to shuffle through the mail, he accidentally knocked over the small jar that held locks of Ray's hair from her first haircut. As he fingered the small, soft hairs, he sighed deeply. He took the jar in his hand and gently ran his fingers over it. God, why couldn't Rukia be here? He wanted to see her. He wanted to see their son. He wanted to be a family. Gritting his teeth together, Ichigo balled his hands into fists and threw the jar against the wall. As he stared at the broken pieces, he slid down to the ground and put his head in his hands. Why? He would find a way. He would. He had to. He wanted Ray to have a mother and her brother, and he wanted to be a husband to Rukia and a father to Michio, too, not just Ray. Just then, the little girl in question came in and gasped when she saw Ichigo. She walked over, Cookie in her arms, and sat down beside him. "Daddy, are you sad again because of Mommy?" Ichigo didn't speak. Ray always knew when he was thinking of Rukia. She put her bunny in his lap, and Ichigo smiled sadly at it. Years before, he had refused to get Rukia a bunny when she had asked for one. When he saw her again, he would give her a bunny. He would give her a tiny, fluffy baby bunny, like the one she had wanted. Yeah, baby. I'm sad about mommy. It hurts. Can I kiss it better? Ray asked, reaching over to pet cookies. No, it's not that kind of hurt. But you can give daddy a hug and help him do the dishes from this morning. Okay. Ray hugged Ichigo, and he stood up while she was still in his arms and carried her over to the sink. Yeah, he would see Rukia again. He was sure about that. He had to. June 8th, 2007, 4:26 p.m. Rukia heard a light knock on the door and smiled, walking over to it. It had to be Ichigo. He was supposed to be home hours ago. He probably wanted to spend extra time with his family, though, so she wouldn't get mad. But she wanted help with Michio. He was sick, but not nearly sick enough to hold him still for even 2 minutes. He was jumping around and hopping in only a diaper and a light blue soft sweater. She was trying to potty train him, and at 2.5 he should have been. But everyone had always told her that boys were harder. He was currently toddling around, laughing, and his cheeks were bright pink when she opened the door. She stopped, however, when she saw who it was. She put her dish towel down and smiled. Bye, Orangey. What are you doing here? Dad. Michio questioned, coming into the room, his tiny blanket traveling behind him. He nearly fell over a couple times, his small, toddling feet not quite used to him running yet. No, Dad? He asked, turning to Rukia. She shook her head. No, Dada isn't back yet. She failed to see the look on Rinji's face when she told Michio this. Dada, Michio said sadly, dropping down onto his diapered butt and pouting. Rukia smiled and reached down to pick him up, handing him his juice. It was in a bottle and had his medication, which he refused to take in it. Come on in, Nisama, Rinji. They followed her into the living room, where she moved a few toys off of the couch before sitting down. Michio wiggled out of her grasp and ran across the room, laughing, before he grabbed a piece of paper and ran back over, climbing back onto Rukia's lap and settling there with his crayon and paper. What are you here for? You don't usually vis unless Ichigo is home, she said, patting Michio's head of soft hair. He smiled up at her, coughing, before he turned back to his picture. We came to deliver some news, Byakuya said. Rinji wasn't speaking as he watched Michio. What were they doing? Oh yeah, they were about to tell Rukia that Ichigo was dead, which he wasn't. He was alive. Yet this news would scar Rukia for life, and he was about to lie to hurt her. Dad, Michio said, holding up his picture. Rukia nodded, not paying much attention to the scribble that the baby had put together. He ignored her and went back to drawing. What news? She asked. There was an accident. Where? On Earth? Fear was beginning to show. Byakuya nodded. Rukia's eyes filled with worry. Ichigo. Is Ichigo okay? What about? God, what about Ray? She asked, her eyes filling with tears when neither Rinji or Byakuya answered. Tell me, she yelled desperately. Rinji put his head in his hands. He couldn't bear to watch this. God, what was he doing? He was about to lie to his best friend, telling her that the man she loved more than the world was dead. Tell me, please. Both Ichigo and Ray are dead, Byakuya said. Rukia looked shocked for a moment before the tears started to flow down her face. Her whole body was shaking as she spoke. No, no, no. It can't be. Ichigo promised me he'd come back. He promised. He'd be alive. It can't be true, not Ichigo and Ray. Please tell me it's not true. Michio began crying, too, though he didn't realize why he was crying. He cried whenever Rukia did. Rukia hugged him tightly to her. No, they can't be gone. Not Ichigo. Not my baby. Rinji couldn't take it anymore. He stood up and turned around, biting back his own tears. Byakuya remained impartial as he spoke. I am sorry, Ruka. But they're in Soul Society, right? She asked, holding Michio tighter as he began to wail loudly. His small, hard sobs broke through everyone's ears. Ichigo was a Shinigami. He will be reincarnated into the real world. And Ray was born of 2 Shinigami. She, too, will return to the real world. I didn't get to tell him. Or her. I haven't told anyone, but God, they can't be gone, no. Rukia was crying harder than he had ever seen. Her tears were flowing fast, and her hands were shaking as she held her baby boy in her arms. Rinji wanted to hit something as he watched mother and son cry for a man and a baby that they had lost. Ichigo had been right. It was tearing Rukia apart. The baby she had fought for so hard. The man cared for her and loved her through everything. And I wanted to tell him I'm pregnant again. God, another baby to grow up without a father. What had they done? July 13th, 2009. Michio closed his eyes and sighed, pulling his blanket over his head. His mommy was crying again. She always did whenever he mentioned his daddy. Why? He knew she loved his daddy. Ichigo was his name, but every time he mentioned daddy, his mommy would get a sad look in her eyes, and he would hear her cry eventually. He didn't mean to. He didn't want his mommy to cry. But, Daddy, why wouldn't he come back? Wiping his own tears away, Michio tried to sleep, and soon his eyes were slipping closed and his breathing was slowing. He clasped in his hand tightly the picture of his sister. He wanted to see her. He wanted to talk to her. He wanted to ask her what their dad was like. Because maybe wherever she was, he was too. He wanted to protect his baby sister and his other sister too. Then he fell asleep. His dream was weird. He was standing in a completely white room. The walls were white, the ceiling was white, and so were the floors. It didn't even look like a room. It never ended. Turning around in a circle, he began looking for a way out. Mommy? He asked quietly. Then, when he began running but got nowhere, he began to cry. Mommy! But no one heard him. He was alone. He clenched his fists and his eyes closed, trying to get out of this dream. But nothing happened. Then, he heard another voice. It was a quiet, small, scared voice. Daddy? He turned around fast, surprised to see another little girl there. She was Ray. He yelled, beginning to run over to her. She turned around, but she apparently didn't notice him. He stopped only a few inches from her, waving his hand in front of her face. She still didn't notice, and she was crying. Daddy, Daddy. He frowned, reaching out to touch her. He gasped when his hand seemed to go straight through her. That made his eyes go wide, and he blinked several times before stepping back and scratching his head. Huh. She didn't seem to notice him, but it surely was Ray. He knew it. Even though she looked older, she was the same ice blue eyes, same hair like his, and she had the same look on her face as his mommy did. Yup, this was his sister. Can you hear me, Ray? He asked again, jumping up and down in front of her. But she didn't respond. She just sat down on the ground and curled into a little ball and put her head between her knees. Why can't I see her, then? He asked himself, dropping down beside her. Hey, sissy, guess what? Mommy misses you. For some reason, she seemed to notice him for a split second. She turned to face him, surprise in her gaze, but then turned back around, as if she was looking for something. Michio scrunched his face up in thought, then snapped his fingers. Ray, do you know who Mommy is? Mommy? The little girl whispered. Mommy? She still couldn't see him. He knew, but she could hear him for some reason. Yeah, our mommy. I'm Michio, your big brother. By 3 minutes, Ray said, frowning, though not sure where to direct her frown. Michio laughed. It was actually 5 minutes, but he didn't expect her to know that. She had left with Daddy, his mommy had said, and also according to Mommy, Daddy was a little dense, though she loved him anyway. Ray spoke. Where are you, Michio? Where is Mommy? I want to see Mommy. She was crying again, but this time it was out of longing to see a mother who she had been pulled away from at such a young age. Mommy isn't here now, but can you see me? No. Duh. Can you hear me? Yes. Duh again. Where are we? Michio asked, standing to his feet and jumping up and down again. His feet sounded like they were hitting onto something, but he couldn't tell where any walls or anything was. It was all white, nothing else. And what is Daddy like? You were with him, right? I love Daddy, Ray said simply, standing up too. Where are you standing? Right in front of you, Ray, Michio said, rolling his eyes. Ray turned around and kicked out with her small, bunny pajama-covered foot. It made contact with his own sky blue pajamas, and he began to hop around in circles. Yup, Ray was like Mommy. She kicked hard, but Mommy had never kicked him. Only Uncle Renji and a few other guys. But they knew it hurt, so he did too. What'd you kick me for? I just wanted to make sure I wasn't hearing voices. Besides, you needed kicked. She stuck her tongue out at him and ran away, giggling. Michio frowned as he followed her. He could surprise her. She couldn't see him. But before he could see her again, she suddenly disappeared. He stopped in his tracks. Then he could feel himself leaving too. Then he was back at home, sitting up in his bed and breathing hard. Ray! He jumped out of his bed and ran over to his school supplies. He didn't know why. It was like his body was moving itself. He quickly took out some paper and pencils and began to draw. Rukia rubbed her eyes tiredly as she walked back in her bedroom. But instead of seeing the light off and both children sleeping quietly, when she walked in, the room was flooded with light and Michio was on the floor, his face drawn in concentration as he worked on a picture. Iniame, who had been sleeping on Rukia's bed, was sitting down beside Michio, sucking her fingers and kicking her pink, pajama-clad feet back and forth, each making contact with the ground in rhythm. When she saw Rukia, she climbed to her baby feet and toddled over. Mama! Rukia picked her up and walked over to Michio, leaning down beside him. It's bedtime, baby, no more drawing. But she cut herself off. Instead of his usual stickmen and bunnies, he was drawing Ray. She knew it was Ray. It had to be. Her hair was penciled in perfectly, and Rukia could never forget her eyes. But not just that. The drawing was one of an artist, someone who had been practicing for many, many years, and Michio was drawing it effortlessly. When she tried to get his attention, he paid no attention to her. Scared, Rukia ran out of the room and grabbed Renji by the arm, taking him in and showing him what Michio was doing. Good God, is he really drawing that? Renji asked, his eyes wide as Michio began to draw Ray's jean skirt. Yes. Renji, what is going on? I don't know. Hey buddy, what's you drawing? Renji asked quietly, reaching out to cover Michio's hand with his. The little boy shrugged it off and continued drawing like he had never noticed Renji. His hand moved fast, and his eyes swept over the picture rapidly. Rukia clutched Renji's arm as she watched Michio. When he was finished, he clutched the picture in his hands and turned to face them. Ray, it was all he said, and when Rukia stared at the picture, she gasped. But she was so young. She's different. It was true. Ray's blue eyes now had, in the picture, a violet ring around them. Her hair was longer and put up in pigtails, and there were 3 missing teeth in the front of her smile. On her chin, she had a tiny scar stretching about half an inch. Her clothes were a bright red sweater and a jean skirt, and on her thin legs, she wore white pantyhose. Her feet were in pink tennis shoes, and her hair was tied up with the ribbons that Rukia had made her. God, that's Ray, she said, wiping away a tear. I saw her, Mommy, Michio said, in my dream. I saw her, and she talked to me. She wants to see you. Ray, what are you doing up this late? Ichigo asked sleepily, walking into Ray's room and flipping on the light. She didn't seem to notice him, and continued drawing the picture she had started only seconds before. He walked over and placed his hand on her shoulder as he stared into the sketch. It was beautiful. Ichigo's mouth fell open. Surely she couldn't draw like that. She was a worse artist than Rukia even. There was no way she could be drawing what he was seeing. But as her hand flew over the page, adding detail after detail, his eyes grew wider and wider. It was Michio. He looked different, older, but it was him. Ray. She still didn't answer. Not until she was done. She held it up and smiled a toothless smile. Michio. That's Michio? Ichigo asked, running his fingers over the small face. I saw him, Daddy, Ray said. In my dream. I saw him, and he talked to me. He wants to see you. Rukia, still shaking, followed Renji outside into the den once they had put Michio back to bed. She sat down on the couch and put her head in her hands. Ray, but how? She asked, looking up at Renji. He moved his eyes away from hers. Renji, how? I'm not sure, Rukia. I don't know. How could he? Even if Ray were. Renji trailed off, not uttering the word alive, then said, how would he know what she would look like? Rukia shook her head, and Renji sat down beside her. She tiredly laid her head on his chest and sighed, closing her eyes for a second before saying, thanks, Renji. Thanks for being there for us. You're welcome, Rukia, he said, brushing her hair back gently. She smiled, her eyes still closed, and reached up, gently kissing him on the lips. He was surprised, to say the least, but when Rukia reached up to place her palm on his cheek, he wrapped his arms around her neck and deepened the kiss, cursing himself as he pulled back and said, you sure? Rukia nodded, and it was all the encouragement he needed to push his tongue past her lips. She buried her hands in his hair as he pushed her gently back on the couch, propping himself above her as he began to kiss her neck. She arched up against him as he began to nibble her ear, and he smiled. His lips found hers again as he slipped his hand under her shirt, and when he caressed the soft skin of her stomach, she broke the kiss and moaned. Ichigo, shocked. Renji broke away from her and turned away, not meeting her eyes as she realized what had slipped past her lips. Sorry, Rinji, she said, wrapping her arms around her stomach and biting her lip to keep her tears back. You can't move on, can you? He asked softly, still not turning around. What if he's alive, though? Rukia whispered. I know I need to move on to give Michio and Inium a life. But every time I think I can finally move on, I think, what if he's alive? What if he's waiting for me? Why can't I just believe one thing or another? Is Ichigo really gone? Is he Rinji? Rukia asked as Rinji finally turned around to face her. I found out where Michio goes to every day, Rukia said slowly, softly. It's the play place that Ichigo used to take him to. He would swing him around in circles, and they would both laugh under the sunset. Michio would love it when Ichigo put him on his shoulders and ran around with him. He said it made him feel like he was flying. And Ichigo, he just loved spending time with his babies. He would smile when Michio laughed, and he would make funny faces at Rei when she cried. He loved them so much. And Michio goes out there each day, and he told me that he always prays that his daddy will come back. Do you have any idea how much belief it takes for a 4-year-old, who barely even remembers his own father, to keep on praying every single day that a man he doesn't know well will come back? If a child can believe that strongly, why can't I, Rinji? Why can't I believe in Ichigo? I don't know, Rinji said, turning around again to face the door. I know they said he was gone, but every night, I swear I feel him sleeping next to me. But in the morning, I feel so alone. And when I hear Michio praying at night for God to please return Daddy to him, it breaks my heart. I don't even know where he heard about God. And I want Ichigo back too, but I need to know. I need to know if he ever will come back. If not, I need to move on. But if there is even the slightest chance he'll be back, I need to know. I need to know. Rinji knew he shouldn't say a word. He couldn't. Rukia had to believe Ichigo was gone. So, he didn't. He walked over and took her into his arms as she began to cry. He can't come back, Rukia. Not now, nor ever. It was the truth. He couldn't. Rinji knew it. Ichigo was on Earth with Rei, and that was where he needed to stay. If he came back, many people would die. I love you, Rukia, he said softly. I loved you once, Rukia began. And I could do it again, I think. I love Ichigo more than anything in the world. But Rinji cut her off by gently kissing her on the lips. Don't rush yourself. I've waited all my life. I can wait a little longer. Thank you, Rukia said, leaning her head on his chest again. Thank you. He smiled sadly. Was it right not to tell her of Ichigo? Was it right to make her try and forget about the man she loved more than the world? Was it right to make her and her children move on? No, it wasn't, but it was the only thing he could think of. The small family was in pain, a pain that would never go away, and if he could help ease that, even if it meant just being a friend, he would do it. Even if he could never be that important to Rukia, he could give her happiness. Even if he could only be a friend, if she could never move on, he would do it. He loved her that much that he would give her happiness above his own. Rukia clutched to his shirt tighter as she cried unseen tears. They weren't for herself. They were for Ichigo. I'm sorry, Ichigo. I love you. Please forgive me, but I want to give our children a home, a warm, happy home with a mother and a father, since you can't be here to be their father. Will you forgive me? Please, Ichigo, if that is what I choose. March 22nd, 2006, 11:30 p.m. Rukia giggled as Ichigo gently kissed her collarbone before his lips moved back up to her mouth. When he pulled back from her, he smirked, asking, "Are the babies asleep?" Rukia nodded and leaned up to kiss him again as he shed her last piece of clothing. They fell asleep a little before you got home. Good. He lowered his mouth and began kissing her shoulder as he placed his hands on her hips. She moaned gently and pressed her hands against his chest, letting her fingers run over the muscles that had built up over the years. As he began to nibble on her skin, she asked, "Shouldn't we start using protection again now that I stopped breastfeeding the babies?" "Don't know. Right now, don't care," he said, moaning as she kissed him again. He braced himself above her and pressed his mouth tightly over hers as he slid effortlessly into her. She cried out, her scream of passion lost in his lips as he kissed her again and again. "I love you, Rukia," he whispered huskily. "Love you too." Later, they lay together in bed, Ichigo playing with Rukia's hair as he held her close. She was sleepily trying to keep her eyes open, absent-mindedly running her fingers over his chest. He asked quietly, "You really think we should use protection?" Dunno. I got pregnant even when we did, so I'm not sure if it'd make a difference. Anything wrong with a lot of kids? Ichigo asked, smiling in the dark as he felt Rukia's body move against his as she laughed silently. She shook her head, saying, "No, not really, I guess. But right now, I'm happy with Michio and Rei." "Me too. If you want, I can pick up some condoms tomorrow," he said, letting her hair drop back to her face as he kissed her nose. "I'm sure. Are we going to keep running forever?" "What do you mean? Running from the Soul Society?" "Rukia, your family is there. Don't you want to live a normal life?" "Ido? Ichigo. I'm living a normal life. You work during the day while I stay with the babies and I take care of them. That's normal." "Well, except when we fight hollows, but even those don't come around often." "Yeah, but still, I'm happy, Ichigo," she said, curling into him as she prepared to fall asleep. "I really am." The next morning, Ichigo shuffled around in the house in his pajamas until Rukia forcefully made him dress. After changing into a pair of jeans and a sweater, he helped with breakfast and fed the kids while Rukia did dishes. They then left the babies in the living room with some toys while they cleaned up the kitchen. Ichigo was just about to go to work when he heard Michio scream. Running from the kitchen, Rukia right on his heels, he gasped when he saw who was in his living room. "Captain?" Rukia yelled, stepping in front of the babies as Yukitake smiled. "Sorry for dropping in like this. Orders, you know." "What the hell are you doing here?" Ichigo asked, stepping in front of Rukia, who gripped onto his shirt when she saw who was with him. It was Kuratsuchi. The scientist said, "Don't worry, little girl. I'm under orders not to touch those beautiful test subjects." Ichigo growled. "They have names. Use them." Yukitake cut in, sighing and scratching his head. He said, "We didn't come here to fight. We came to take you and your family back to the Soul Society." "What?" Ichigo asked, accidentally dropping the cup towel he was holding. Everything in the room was silent except the giggling of Rei. She was laying on her back while Michio, who was 8 months old and was the only one able to crawl, waved his hands in front of her face. She tried to grab his hands, and when she failed, they started over again. "We came to take you back. There are people who would like to kill you, Kurosaki. And I am under orders from Captain Yamamoto to take you, Mrs. Rukia, and the children back with me." "Captain Yamamoto?" Ichigo asked, frowning, then snapping his fingers. "Ah, the guy with the long beard." Rukia kicked him, and Yukitake smiled. "That's him. How can we trust you?" Ichigo asked, still firmly planted in front of the smaller 3 people behind him. "In my own words, those children are more important to us alive than dead. If they are alive, they can in the future give consent to very few controlled tests if they wish. If they are dead, also in my words, that would hurt everyone. Especially you, Mrs. Rukia, Mr. Ichigo. Trust us. We must go now." Michio broke in just then as he crawled over and grabbed the edge of Yukitake's Shinigami robes. The older man smiled as Rukia reached down to take the baby in her arms. Rukia had changed so much from the scared, new Shinigami he had once known. She was holding Michio with the gentleness of a mother, while the look in her eyes said that she would protect him with the fierceness of a warrior. "All right, we'll go," Ichigo said. "Give us a few minutes. There are things we'll need for the twins." Almost 20 minutes later, they were all ready to go through the gate. Rukia had reservations about going. What were they leaving behind? Their life. That was what? Their friends, Ichigo's family, and everything they had built over the months. The life they had managed to piece together and the home that their babies knew so well. "Let's go," Yukitake said, opening the gate. For hell, butterflies came flying out, and Rukia and Ichigo each held on tighter to the babies as Kuratsuchi eyed them. "Yeah, let's go," Ichigo echoed, a smile coming to his face as he looked backward. Yeah, they were leaving home, but they would make a new home. July 14th, 2009. I want to give Michio and Enium a normal life, but I can't imagine anyone but Ichigo acting as their father. Ichigo loved Michio and Rei more than anything in the world. He loved me, too, and I want us to be a family. I don't know if he's dead. Whenever I ask Renji, he doesn't answer. It's like he knows something I don't. Since that night when I kissed him and nearly made a mistake, the mistake of giving myself away to him, he has been avoiding me a little. He won't mention Ichigo, and he won't look at me. He knows something. I know it. Is Ichigo still alive? Is he? I don't know what to believe anymore. I sometimes think that Ichigo is gone, and that I need to move on. But sometimes I think that he's still out there. I can feel him. And sometimes, like now, I think I'll wait a little longer for him. Maybe he'll come back to me, and Michio. Maybe he'll come back in time to see Eniame lose her first tooth. Maybe not, though, but I can hold out hope. I know I should do something, move on, and give Eniame a life. If I did right now, she wouldn't remember not having a father. Michio would, but he loves Rinji. Rinji loves him, and Rinji loves me. But do I love Rinji? Her hand paused over her journal, and Rukia smiled as she looked over at Michio, who was hugging the picture of Ray close to his chest as he clenched his eyes shut tightly. He was wearing his pajamas, sky blue with doggies all over them and footies, and was curled under his favorite blankie. He opened his bright violet eyes and looked over at her. "Mommy, I can't sleep." She laughed. "Try a little longer, okay?" "Oh, Mommy." He turned around and clenched his eyes tightly shut again, and, shaking her head, Rukia went back to biting her pencil as she stared at the paper. She paused her current entry to write. Michio is so cute. He hugs the picture that he drew, the one he doesn't even remember drawing, and tries to fall asleep because he claims he can see Ray in his dreams. I love him to bits. The next time she looked over, Michio was sleeping. Eniame, however, was not. She was beginning to whimper in her crib. So Rukia uncrossed her legs and climbed out of bed, her own pajamas dragging across the floor as she went to pick Eniame up. Her pajamas, red and silky, were the ones Ichigo had bought her after she had given birth to the twins. He had said the others were too big because of how fat you were during preg. He had never gotten to finish because she had thrown the box that the pajamas had come in at him. After, though, she had kissed him, and then pajamas were all forgotten until later that night. Rukia sat back down on the bed, crossing her legs Indian style as she lay Eniame beside her and let her hand gently run over the baby's tummy. Eniame liked this and stopped crying as she kicked her feet back and forth in the air. Rukia picked up her pencil with her free hand to continue writing. "I want to wait for Ichigo. I feel as if he's with me now. I want him here with me, and Michio and Eniame, and I want Ray. God, I want to see my baby girl again. I want to see her smile, and I want to hear her laugh. I want my baby girls to play together, and for Ray to hold Eniame gently in her arms and be proud that her little sister was named after her. I want a family, and I want my family." She had loved Rinji once. She had really loved him, more than a brother and a friend, and if she had never met Ichigo, Michio and Ray might be Rinji's children. But she had met Ichigo. He had changed her world and turned it upside down and inside out. And he had loved her, and he had given her a life and babies and everything she had longed for. Everything every girl longed for when she reached the age where she wanted a child to love and a man to love her and that child. She wrote, "I love Ichigo, and I think I cold love Rinji again. Should I? Should I wait? Should I go on and live? Would Ichigo forgive me if I did? Would he forgive me for giving his baby girl, who he never even knew about, another father? He would, I know it, but he would love her too. He would love Eniame as much as he loves me, and Michio, and as much as he loved Ray. I think I'll wait a little longer. Then I'll move on and love another man. Let another man in my heart and another man love my children. But I'll wait for now." Putting away her journal and pencil, Rukia smiled down at Eniame and laid down on her stomach, her legs up in the air as she watched the baby begin to eat her toes. "Are baby's toes really that interesting?" "Michio and Ray did that too," Rukia said, reaching over to grab one of Eniame's bare feet to put in her own mouth. Eniame screeched loudly, pulling her foot back and laughing when Rukia just grabbed it again and pretended to eat it. Her bright eyes glowed happily, and her small hands waved around in the air. "Mama," Eniame said happily, pulling herself up onto her diapered butt. She scooted forward a little, wrapping her tiny baby arms around Rukia's neck and hugging her. Rukia hugged the baby back, then took a picture out of her journal and pointed to the man with his arms wrapped around her. "Who's that?" she asked. "Dada," Eniame said happily, putting her thin fingers over the orange hair in the picture. "Dada," she said again, smiling. "Yeah, Dada," Rukia said, kissing Eniame on the head. "Do you love Dada?" Eniame nodded happily, just as there was a knock on the door. She looked up to see Rinji already standing in the open doorway, his head leaning against the wood. He smiled softly as he watched Rukia play with Eniame's foot. "Hey, Rinji," Rukia said, turning her attention from him and back to the baby in front of her. The baby who was currently sucking Rukia's picture. the one she always kept with her in her journal. In the picture, she, Rukia, was wearing a light blue, tight dress. It hugged her body, and she had been forced into it by friends, as she hated anything tight. But Ichigo had loved it. His mouth had gone wide when he had seen her. He, in the picture, was wearing a pair of khaki pants with pockets up and down the sides and a t-shirt that had the simple words on it. I'm a daddy. His dad had given it to him when they had gotten back to Earth and everything had settled down. Can we talk? Renji asked, sitting down on the bed. The weight his body caused made Anyame start slipping, but Rukia reached out and grabbed her, kissing her head. About what? About what happened? What about it? Rukia knew she was being impolite, but she couldn't help it. She wanted to forget, not have him bring it up again. Do you regret it? I don't know, Renji. I don't know anything. I want some time. Renji smiled sadly, nodding. I can give you that. Thank you. Ray, are you here? Michio yelled loudly, prancing around the white room once again. Then he saw her, but this time she had a small bunny in her arms. She smiled and waved at him. Huh? She could see him? Must have been cause of the pictures. Michio, looky, it's cookies. Michio stared at the bunny, then smiled. Guess what? Huh? She's cute. She's a he, Ray said, sitting down. Then, smiling, she said, tell me about mommy. Only if you tell me about daddy. They both giggled, and soon Ray was telling of all the Earth things she had learned about, and Michio was going on and on about Zanpakutos and Shinigami. Ray wasn't sure she believed everything he said, but it was fun, and she heard a lot about her mommy. Cookies at one point got loose, and they chased him all across the whole room, though it seemed it did not end, and Michio was the first on the hit into the invisible wall. He rubbed his sore nose. Ouch! Ray giggled at him. Michio, is mommy pretty? Daddy said that she's beautiful. Uh-huh, Michio said happily. She really pretty. And Uncle Renji thinks so too. Uncle Renji? Ray asked, confused. I have Uncle Ishida and Aunt Ishida. I mean, Aunt Orihime. Who is Renji? Oh, he's the guy that we live with. I think he loves mommy. No, daddy loves mommy. Raye argued, Fronin. Michio frowned too, and the two small children sat down, both deep in thought. What's love mean? I don't know, Michio said, shrugging. I just always thought it was how mommy felt for daddy and me and Anyame. Oh, they were silent again. I know, Michio finally said, snapping his fingers, something Ray was surprised he could do, as even she couldn't. They both love mommy, but only daddy is allowed to love mommy, Ray complained, crossing her arms over her chest and pouting. Humph, Michio said, frowning. I like Renji, but I want daddy to be my daddy. But I've seen mommy kissing Renji. It's gross. He stuck out his tongue. I don't want Renji to be my daddy, but mommy likes him. They were both silent for a minute until suddenly Ray said happily, let's break him up. June 26th, 2006, 3:23 p.m. You're slow, Renji, Ichigo said, smiling as he wiped a line of blood off of his face. Renji, who was much worse off than him, growled and jumped back to his feet, his Zanpakuto drawn. But before either he or Ichigo could attack again, Byakuya stood in the middle of them. That is enough for today. But Captain, Renji started to protest. Byakuya cut him off. This training is to help you learn, not kill yourself. Kurosaki is a captain. You will not be able to beat him right off. Take a break, grow stronger, and soon you will fight again. In the meantime, Kurosaki, Ichigo's eyebrows raised, and as he finished drinking everything in the water bottle he had, he looked over at Byakuya, frowning as he wiped more blood off of his face. He said, my turn. Ichigo had never seen Byakuya smirk, but this was the closest he had ever gotten, and probably the closest he would ever get. Whatever. They had just started fighting, and both had nearly gone into Bankai when Ichigo suddenly stopped, dropping from the air and to the ground. He was unhurt, it appeared, until Senbin Zakura hit him. Several cuts appeared on his body before Byakuya realized that he wasn't moving. All the Sakura petals disappeared as he looked over at Ichigo. Blood was dripping down his face, and his face held a worried expression on it. He yelled, Rukia is in trouble. Renji and Byakuya, not bothering to argue with him, followed Ichigo as he ran through the woods until they finally came to a clearing. Rukia was laying in the clearing, blood surrounding her, and the cry of a small child was piercing the air. Ichigo ran over, his Zanpakuto dropping to the ground loudly. and fell to his knees beside Rukia's body. Rei was clutched tightly in her grip, crying as loudly as her small lungs would allow. Her face was bright red, and she too was covered in blood, but it was not her own blood. "Rukia!" he yelled, feeling tears fall down his cheeks as he took her into his arms. Just like his mom had died to protect him. "No, I won't let you die," he yelled, holding her tightly to him as he stood up. Rei, however, stopped screaming and reached out, putting her hand on Rukia's chest. Ichigo paused and watched as the large, gaping wound began to close. As he looked around, he realized that Byakuya and Renji were fighting whatever it was that had attacked her. It looked like a hollow, but not here in Soul Society. "Surely, Ichigo." Ichigo's gaze turned to the woman laying in his arms, and he smiled when he saw Rukia holding Rei tightly to her, both still covered in blood. Rei had stopped crying and was waving her bloody hands back and forth while Rukia stared up at Ichigo, her eyes hazy and her words unclear. What happened? "I don't know." "Shoo, you'll be fine. Rei healed you." Later, it turned out that the hollow was some sort of puppet from God knows where that had been sent to attack Rukia and Rei. Well, Rei really, but Rukia had been the one who was there at the moment. So she had been attacked too, and nearly killed trying to save Rei. And as Ichigo stood over Rukia in the medical unit's infirmary, he vowed that he would never let Rukia get hurt again, no matter what the cost. July 15th, 2009. "Mommy, please tell me about Daddy," Michio said, reaching up to grasp her hand as they walked along. He was skipping, kicking rocks every now and then as she tried to hold him still long enough to put his shoes, which he had thrown off, back on. Iniam was in her arms, only making it that much harder. After a while, she gave up and stuffed the shoes in the diaper bag. "You want to know about Daddy?" "Aha. What was he like?" "He loved me, right? And he loved you too." When he saw the intense look in his mother's eyes, he knew that Rei was right in suggesting that he bring up memories of their daddy to keep her mind off of Uncle Renji until they came up with a better plan. But this could actually be what they needed. "Your daddy was a wonderful man. Where did you meet?" Michio asked, kicking a rock with his bare foot as Rukia paused to look at some things in a shop window. They continued soon. "I met him when he was younger. He was rude, annoying, and rash then. I didn't care for him as I do now. But he was a close friend and someone I could trust with my life." "Did you love him then?" Another rock was kicked and tears were held back. "Not then. Later, baby." They were silent for a while, only the soft snoring of the sleeping Iniame breaking into their thoughts. Michio's eyebrows were drawn. He decided to be direct in asking his mommy about some things. Rei said that Daddy taught her that sometimes that was the best way. "Mommy, do you love Uncle Renji?" Rukia stopped in her tracks. She sighed. Michio was too much like Ichigo. He could read her feelings and tell everything she was worried about, or when she was scared or sad. Michio was watching her, waiting for an answer, and when she finally did answer, she spoke slowly and carefully. "Not like I loved your daddy, but I think I might." "Do you have to?" If Rukia didn't know any better, she would say that Michio was pouting. She smiled a little and took his small hand in hers, running her fingers gently over the soft skin. She said, "No, baby, I don't have to, but I might want to." "Oh!" Michio frowned as he walked along, kicking rocks and staring so intently in the ground, he was sure he was going to make a hole and fall in. But he didn't, and when he finally looked back up, his mommy was smiling down at him. "You look so much like your father with that look on your face." Michio smiled brightly, the concentration gone and replaced by a happy, bouncy look as he skipped along. He said, "Mommy, if Daddy were still here, would you love him? Or Uncle Renji?" "I would love Daddy." Michio nodded, pulling his hand from Rukia's to reach down, wrap it around a small rock. Standing up straight again, he threw the rock as far as he could. It is against something metal and sent a loud clang through the air. Rukia looked down in concern as he continued to throw rocks at the metal. "Then love Daddy, Mommy. Don't love Uncle Renji." Michio then said, "Mommy, Daddy's coming back, right?" Rei said he loves us too." Rukia smiled sadly, trying to fight tears. She sighed as she helped Michio to his feet. They walked in silence to the 6th Company's quarters, and Rukia walked inside to see Renji sitting behind his desk, his head drowned in a huge pile of paperwork. "Uncle Renji!" Michio yelled loudly, his hands cupped over his mouth as he tried to wake the sleeping redhead. Renji's head snapped up, and his eyes were open and wide in seconds. He fell from his chair, and Michio toppled to the ground, laughing. When Renji sat up, paperwork sliding from his head. Rukia just sighed. You said you'd watch Michio for me today, while I took Iniem with me to shop in town. Can you manage him? She was smiling as Renji stood to his feet fast, nodding. I can handle a 4-year-old. Piece o' cake. Really? Rukia raised her eyebrows, then, shaking her head, leaned down beside Michio, kissing him on the head. See you later, Michio. Love ya, mommy. He yelled happily, standing to his feet and wrapping his small arms around her neck in a hug. When she pulled back, she sent Renji a look that said, if anything happens to him, you're a dead man. She walked out, leaving Renji with Michio, who was hyper. Poor Renji. A few hours later, Renji had just quieted Michio down and was going back to his work. Finally. But Michio didn't like this. All play and no work, he said. Michio shuffled around the room, his sneakers squeaking on the floor as he acted like a train. Renji was rubbing his temple. How in the hell did Rukia manage with both Michio and Iniem? It was impossible. Michio dropped down on his butt and crossed his legs Indian style before dropping his head in his hands. He sighed deeply, staring at the wall opposite to where Renji was sitting. His sister's words flashed through his mind, and deciding that direct would indeed be the best way, he stood up and walked over to Renji's desk, where he stuck out his tongue and knitted his eyebrows in concentration before he climbed up onto the desk, sending paperwork flying in every direction. Seeing this, Renji sighed as soon as Michio landed, cross-legged, on his desk with his arms crossed over his chest and his eyebrows knit. He looked exactly like Ichigo. Do you love mommy? Huh? Do you love my mommy? Michio asked again, his face not changing. Renji couldn't believe it. He was being freaking interrogated by a 4-year-old. Why does mommy think daddy is dead? How did you know that? Renji asked, glad to get away from the previous subject. Michio rolled his eyes, as if Rukia hadn't been hiding the fact that Ichigo and Rei were dead from the very beginning. He said, I read it in mommy's journal. You read? Eyebrows were raised, and more sighs came from the small child. Mommy's teaching me. Quit avoiding the question. Nah, there was no way that kid could be 4. Maybe 10. Why does your mother think your father is dead? Renji repeated the question, hoping that Michio would ask a different one, so he wouldn't have to answer. Instead, Michio said, cause he's not. Neither is Rei. They both live on Earth. But mommy thinks they're dead. Well, Michio didn't give him time to answer. Why? Can I tell her they're alive? I think she thinks I think that they're alive, but she doesn't believe me. She hasn't said anything, but I've mentioned Rei a few times. I think she thinks I think that I'm just dreaming. Renji's head was spinning. Too much. Thinking. Abarai, glad for the distraction. Renji turned around to face his captain, who was standing in the doorway, watching as Michio interrogated Renji. Yes, sir? His head still hurt. Finish up your paperwork. I'll take Michio for a walk. There's something I need to tell him, anyway, but finish before I come back. Right. Renji turned around and went back to work as Michio jumped off of his desk and followed Byakuya out the door. He was skipping happily as if he had actually learned something from Renji, which he hadn't. They walked silence for a while, until Michio reached up and put his small hand through Byakuya's. The older man was surprised, but when he looked down to see Michio happily kicking rocks across the ground as they walked, he couldn't bring himself to pull his hand from Michio's. Instead, he held onto his hand tighter. Michio was the one who began to speak first. Yes, Michio. Why does mommy think daddy and Rei are dead? 'Cause they're alive. Byakuya took a deep breath in. Talking about death to a 4-year-old was difficult. Michio, that was what I wanted to talk to you about. If I told you this, would you promise to not tell your mother? At a nod from Michio, Byakuya continued. Your father and your sister are indeed alive. They were sent to Earth in order to protect you and your mother. And any aim, Michio said happily, kicking another rock. And any aim, Byakuya agreed. But the reason that your mother had to believe your father was dead, he was hurting her. Huh? Daddy was hurting mommy? How? Michio had a million other questions, but he wanted to know the answer to that one the most. They have a bond like you and Rei do. You can see Rei in your dreams. But your mother and father had a much deeper connection. They don't know it though. Are you following? Michio nodded, and Byakuya nearly smiled. He was a really smart kid. Your father was hurting your mother by their bond. Unlike yours and Rei's, theirs was different. Instead of being able to communicate, The only thing we could detect from Rukia's and Ichigo's was that, unknowingly, he was pulling Ryatsu from her and adding to his own. Not only was this making her spiritually weak, but it was hurting her. Would she have died? Michio asked, sticking his fingers in his mouth. He didn't understand much of what his uncle was saying, but he understood that his daddy had been hurting his mommy without knowing so. Yes, she would have died. So that's why mommy has to think daddy is dead? Byakuya nodded, saying, though he doesn't know that was the reason. Why does mommy have to think he's dead, though? We knew that, in the shock and pain that learning that he was gone, Rukia would unconsciously break the connection between herself and Ichigo. We hoped, at least. And she did. We're so sorry that you have to live without a father, Michio. But that was the way it had to be. Rei and Ichigo are still alive on Earth, as you know, but Rukia can't know that. You can't tell your mother. Why not? I want mommy to love daddy, not Uncle Renji. I want daddy and Rei to be here with us. And Anyame, he doesn't even know about Anyame, and neither did Rei. I want Rei and daddy here with me, because I promised mommy I would protect Rei. The firm, but almost broken look on Michio's face made Byakuya wrap his arms around the small, sobbing child. He had never held anyone but his wife so gently, but it felt so right to have the small child in his arms. Michio buried his face in Byakuya's shoulder and cried loudly, his body shaking as he whispered, I want daddy to come back and love me and mommy. Hearing the pain in the child's voice and remembering the look in Rukia's eyes when she had learned of Ichigo's death, Byakuya closed his eyes slowly. He wanted to do something. He wanted to piece together a broken family. He was going to get Ichigo back. He would find a way to make it safe. He had to. August 3rd, 2006, 2:52 p.m. Ichigo smiled as he watched Michio and Rei run around the house. They were both screaming loudly and happily. At a year and 2 months, they were both walking and beginning to talk. They were a handful, sighing. Ichigo settled back into the couch, his eyes closing briefly before Rukia walked into the room. She kicked his feet off of the table, and he pouted. Rukia, don't you Rukia me, she said, smirking. Come on, up. It's your laundry day. Ichigo groaned, though still smiling, as he pulled himself up off of the couch, and, picking up a baby under each arm as he went, he walked into the laundry room where he sat the twins in a pile of clean laundry. He wanted to keep an eye on them. Dada, Michio? Ichigo asked, sitting down on the floor with the basket of socks he had to sort. Michio laughed, his teeth showing as he reached out, trying to grab the sock that Ichigo was waving around in the air. Ichigo smirked and held it away from him. Da-da-da, Rei babbled, laying down on her back and kicking her feet in the air. Ichigo sighed, reaching over to rub her stomach. She liked that. He had once referred to her as a good little puppy, and Rukia had kicked him so hard he hadn't been able to walk straight. The babies continued to play around aimlessly while Ichigo continued to put the socks together. He was glad that Rukia had made him get the babies different colors, as they were the same size. Rei had yellow, pink, and red, while Michio had blue, green, and orange. But the socks were so tiny. It was cute. He smiled, putting one on his finger. It was amazing that they were so small. When he held either of the twins' hands in his, he was still amazed that they were so tiny. And they were his and Rukia's. Ichigo? Ichigo asked, turning around, smiling at Rukia. Michio was toddling over to her, grabbing on her leg and bouncing up and down, chanting mama, mama, mama. Rukia laughed as she reached down to pick him up. She said, where did you put my toothbrush? Didn't touch it. Rukia sighed, and handing Michio back to Ichigo, she walked out of the room. Ichigo smirked. Rukia was always losing something. Well, most of the time, it did end up being his fault, but still. Rei, Ichigo warned, eat that sock and no tummy rubs for a week. He would have laughed at himself if he weren't used to this. It was strange how one adapted so quickly to holding a child smaller than a pillow and talking sweetly to them. Rei dropped the sock she was holding and smiled, giggling for no reason as she stood to her feet and toddled over to him, falling into his lap and sticking her fingers in her mouth. He smiled and kissed her head. Ichigo was about to go back to folding socks when Michio stood to his own 2 shaky feet and walked over, holding his hand out to touch Rei. She reached out her own hand, and Ichigo watched, interested, as their tiny baby fingers met. When a light blue glow suddenly surrounded them, he broke them apart immediately and watched as they just giggled and laughed. What the hell had just happened? July 15th, 2009, 1:13 p.m. Teacher Sama? Ray asked, walking over, a frown on her face. The young woman smiled, reaching out and ruffling Ray's hair. She giggled, her frown replaced by a smile as the young woman, whose name tag read Danny, pulled up a bright blue, child's chair beside her own. Yes, Kurosaki-chan, I got a question. Okay. What is it? Well, more like a problem. See, my daddy and my mommy live apart because, well, they have reasons. Ray knew she wasn't supposed to say anything about what she had learned from Michio or Ichigo. She continued, Daddy still loves mommy and mommy still loves daddy. But mommy is starting to love another guy that isn't daddy. Another problem. Mommy thinks that daddy is dead. The teacher sat there, wide-eyed, as she watched the young girl before talk like a teenager. Minus the daddy and mommy bits. No teenager who wanted a social life said mommy and daddy. And I have a brother. He's my twin, but him and I talk to each other. So I know all about mommy and he knows about daddy, but neither daddy or mommy believe that we're talking to each other. So mommy doesn't know daddy is alive and daddy doesn't believe that I've seen Michio and stuff. She took a breath. I want mommy to love daddy, but since she thinks he's gone, Michio, that's my brother, said that mommy wants to love someone else. We decided to break mommy and the other guy, Uncle Renji, up. But it's up to my brother to do it because I can't get in touch with mommy and Uncle Renji. But boys are dense, and I don't think he's going to do it right. Danny just gaped. Anyway, if my mommy and daddy live so far apart, how can they love each other? I know my daddy wants to see my mommy. He gets all sad and stuff when I mention her. Okay, Danny said, trying to piece her thoughts back together. So, you and your brother are trying to break your mommy and another man up? MMHM. And your mommy believes that your daddy is gone? Correcto. So now it's up to you two to try and get them back together before your mommy falls in love with another man. Yepper. I want mommy and daddy to meet again. They get all kissy and mushy and stuff, but as long as mommy doesn't love another man, I'd be happy. Then try and get them to meet. Think up an excuse to get your daddy to go where your mommy lives. Say, does she live near a park or something? MMHM. She didn't really know, but she would ask Michio that night. Right. Then tell your brother to get your mommy to go to the same place as you get your daddy to go to and have them meet. Yay. All right. Thanks, Teacher Sama. Danny smiled as she watched Ray skip off. Sighing, she fell back into her chair. Since when had she started teaching a bunch of overmature children? Life was hard. She continued to sign the papers she had been working on until Ray had bounced up. She had finished nearly half of them when she heard a loud scream. Dropping her pencil, she ran outside to where the children were playing. She looked around, and finally a small boy ran up to her, grabbed her by the arm, and yelled, "Quickie! Quickie! Kurosaki-san is hurt." Danny ran over to where the little kid led her and gasped when she saw Ray. The little girl was crying, blood staining her whole leg. When she dropped down beside Ray, Danny reached out and gently probed the skin. There was a large gash on her knee. She had cut herself on the swing set. Ray, stay right here. I'll go get the nurse, all right? Joe. Ichigo knew that it wasn't the best way to answer the phone, but it would work. The person on the other end was slightly frantic until he stopped her, asking, wait, who is this? This is Danny, from your daughter, Ray's preschool. What's wrong? Ichigo asked, sitting up straight in his chair, causing some things to fall to the floor. He didn't even notice. Ray, she hurt herself. She was bleeding badly, and when I ran off to get the nurse, when I came back, she was completely healed, and she was running around happily. I don't know what happened, okay, calm down, please, Danny-san, Ichigo said, taking a deep breath. I'll be there in half an hour, all right? All right. Ichigo was there in 10 minutes. He ran inside in search of Ray and was surprised when she attacked his knee, gripping it tightly, smiling up at him. Her ice blue eyes were glowing, and her black streaked orange hair was bouncing in the pigtails as she jumped up and down. Daddy, Ray, where is your teacher? Ichigo asked, reaching down and picking her up in his arms. She pointed him to where Danny's office was, and he knocked on the door, walking inside and sitting down when she motioned for him to. She was still visibly shaking, and after seeing a little girl hurt and bleeding, then a minute later, perfectly fine, he would have been shaking too. What happened, Kurosaki-kun? Danny asked. Ray, she was bleeding badly. She was hurt badly. Then she was fine. Ichigo sighed, glad that he still had some memory eraser left over from Rukia's stock years back. He said to Rei, "Go outside and play for a while, all right?" 5 minutes later, after Danny's memory was erased and replaced with something having to do with mutant turtles, Ichigo walked outside and picked Rei up. It wasn't time to go home, but she could bail out on one day of school. When she was buckled into her booster seat and Ichigo was driving, he began speaking to her. "You healed yourself again, didn't you, Rei?" "Sorry, Daddy," she said, looking down at the car floor as she stuck out her bottom lip. "But it hurt really, really badly." "I know it hurts, baby, but you can't heal yourself in public. You have to let the doctors do that. No one can know of your special powers, all right?" "All right." The sigh that Rei emitted made Ichigo smile. "Good. Now, do you want to get some ice cream before we go home?" "I want cookies and cream," Rei said, jumping up and down in front of the ice cream freezer in the grocery shop. Ichigo smiled. "That was your mother's favorite kind." "Huh? Really? Well, I likes it too." She was smiling happily, bouncing around. Her light pink, spaghetti tank top would slide up her pale skin every time, and her sandal-clad feet thunked on the floor. Ichigo reached a hand down, placing it on her head to hold her in place. She giggled, reaching into the freezer and taking out a small tub of the cookies and cream ice cream. She held it tightly to her chest and smiled widely as she began to hop in circles. Nah, she didn't need any more sugar. "Daddy, can we get some cookies too?" "What for?" "We have cookies at home." "That's my bunny." "No eating him," she said, poking Ichigo in the knee, one of the highest things she could reach. She was small like Rukia. "We have cookies in the ice cream," Ichigo tried. Rei shook her head and he sighed, though his heart wasn't in it. He wanted cookies too. He said, "What kind do you want, you little cookie monster?" "I wants Oreo." Ichigo nodded and took a pack of the cookies off of the shelf. He knew they were her favorite, and his too. They both loved the Oreos. Finally, when they were back in the car, Rei asked Daddy, "Where does Mommy live?" "Far away, baby." "Where?" "Somewhere we can't go." "Where?" Ichigo sighed. "Where?" Rei asked again, frowning. "She's a princess that lives in a castle in another world with the strict prince, who is her brother, and dash." "Daddy," Rei moaned, rolling her eyes. Ichigo smiled at her in the mirror. Rei then asked, "Daddy, I told you I could see Michio in my dreams, right?" "Well, he told me that Mommy likes Uncle Renji." "Is that bad?" Rei didn't notice Ichigo stiffing, but as soon as she had said the words, Ichigo bit his lip. "Rukia likes Renji." He knew something like that might happen, as she thought he was gone and would want to move on. But it hurt him. "He said that she's waiting for you. Can we go back, Daddy? I don't want Mommy to have to wait too long. Maybe one day, Rei." "Okay," she sighed, looking down at the floor as she kicked her feet back and forth slowly. Ichigo watched her in the mirror and smiled softly. She needed a mother. Someone to hold her lovingly like he couldn't. She needed a mother's touch. Someone would be home with her during the day and make cookies with her, and who would go to the mall and shop all day. "Daddy, why do you look sad again?" Rei's small, soft voice cut into his thoughts, and Ichigo glanced back at her before turning his eyes to the road again. "No reason, Mommy." Though it sounded like question, both Ichigo and Rei knew she was right. He was thinking of Mommy again. He sighed. "Yeah, I was thinking of Mommy again." He was always thinking of Mommy. That's it for today, guys. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you do, please leave a like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to check out author of this story. Thanks for watching. Take care.